Okay, great. We are good to go. So, everyone, I'm so excited to have you here today. We are here with Deb Ashmore, who is going to give us a state of the system presentation. Deb is a brilliant, brilliant mind, and we are lucky to have her today. I'm going to go ahead and read her wonderful bio so that I get it exactly right. Welcome. Deb and this is our keynote session, and we're really excited to have you and have Deb. Deb is the principal analytics consultant at Blackbaud, and she's here with us today as a gift to all of us, so thank you. Deb, before I turn it over to you, I want to let everyone listening right now know that you're all muted, but we really want to encourage that you chat your questions to us in the question box. We have the lovely and talented Jody Shy behind the scenes. She may answer some of your questions, or she may tell you that we're going to jump in and answer them shortly. One of the exciting things about this session is that we are going to take your questions live. So if you've ever wanted to ask Deb a question as she's doing one of the states of the system, we can do that today. So again, please chat us your questions. We would love to hear from you. If we don't get to any of your questions today, we will try to answer them after the session. This session is being recorded, and we will share that recording with you. And with that, Deb, I'll turn it over to you, and I'll just jump on in if there are questions. Thank you.
Excellent. No, thank you. What a lovely introduction. Thank you so much. And I am absolutely delighted to be here with you today. Um, let's see here. Okay, so we are going to walk through the data, lots and lots of data coming up in the next hour for you. So I hope you love numbers as much as I do. We're going to walk through data from 63 public media organizations. It represent a variety of market sizes. There's lots of state networks included, licensee types. Of course, they're from across the United States, different radio formats when we're looking at the radio data. So a wide variety, a wide cross-section of public media organizations included today. It's data from over 3.4 million donors, so it's a really large set of data to really give us an accurate view of how public media donors are responding. So let's go ahead and dive in. I'm going to start with radio. So the first half of the presentation is going to be all about radio, and then I'm going to go ahead and jump into television. So we're going to start with a look at what happened with radio, mostly focusing on the last year, but going back into a five-year trend view for some views. All right, so let's go ahead and jump in. All right, so at the medians, overall donor counts increased for radio by 1% in fiscal year 20. And those, the plus and minuses on either side of that were pretty small, most within a 5% range, plus or minus, most of the stations included. So stations were pretty tight to that median. Not a whole lot of change there, and we all know why, right? COVID happened and everyone stayed home, and your cume listening really shrank, right? But your core stayed strong, and your core continued to support you in big ways. Your median revenue increased by 6% last year, right? So for those who are still listening, for whom radio plays a really big part of their life, and whether they're home or not, they're still tuning in. They responded to you and to your calls in a big way, digging deep, and it's really in line with the growth that we're seeing in fundraising across the nonprofit world, right? You may be reading articles, I'm sure you are, about what happened in fiscal year or calendar year 20 or fiscal year 20, and hearing about how direct marketing fundraising did pretty well, and we're seeing that here in your revenue increases last year. All right, so let's take a look at a 5-year trend view then. What had been happening prior to the pandemic, and how does that compare to the last year? So this is looking at donors and revenue, again at the medians. We're looking at all donors combined, single and sustainers, right? So that 5-year trend view, we see that donors have increased from about 36,000 at the median in 2016. They're up by 38,000 in fiscal year 20. It's a 6% increase in donors over that 5-year period. Notice how there was that bump up, right, between 16 and 17, right? You got that Trump bump, right, that year when we had lots of tune in, and then things kind of settled down, right? It stayed around that same rate, around that 38,000 mark. And so that's where we remain in fiscal year 20. So a 6% increase over the 5-year period in donors for radio. But look at revenue, right? Revenue has been increasing, growing every year, right? So donor value has been increasing for radio. And again, no different between 19 and 20. A nice big increase in donor value resulted in that increase in revenue that we saw. And over the 5-year period, revenue for radio up by 26%. So strong growth in revenue. So let's go ahead and take a look at donor value. So back in 2016, our revenue per donor, again, we're looking at all donors, single and sustainers combined. Back in 2016, that revenue was about $150 per donor, up to $175 per donor in fiscal year 20. Certainly very high revenue per donor, right? One of the highest across any nonprofit sector, right, for public radio. $25 increase over that 5-year period, a 3% increase in the 2019 to fiscal year 20. All right, so now let's go ahead and take a look at your donors by whether they are making single gifts or sustainer gifts. As single gifts will always be represented in that blue color, and sustainers will always be represented in that orange color. You'll see written out in the reports, and I may use the words interchangeably. In our reports, we use the word recurring for sustainers. It's synonymous, means exactly the same thing. A single gift donor is someone who is just not a sustainer. It doesn't mean they only made a single gift in the year. It just means they make their gifts one at a time. So for single gift donors, right, each year we saw that we had declining numbers of donors, right? Every year a decline in our single gift donor counts. Then what happened between 19 and 20, right? A modest increase at the median, but it was just very strange, right, to see even flat, right? Even a flat, which, a couple hundred donors, we'll call that flat change. But even that was a surprise, right? It just out of the ordinary for the last several years, right? If we went back before 2016, we'd see declines in single gift giving. So this was, the first sort of right moment for radio fundraising last year. But sustainers continue to increase. So okay, all right, that looks pretty normal. Sustaining donors have increased by 36% over the 5-year period. So continued strong growth overall in sustainer giving for radio. So what happened then as far as the file composition, right? How does the overall file look then? The percentage of donors making single gifts and the percentage of donors then who are making sustainer gifts. The blue again is your single gifts. The orange are your sustainers. This light shade are folks who make both, right? So in the same year, these are the folks who make both a single gift and a sustainer gift, right? So notice how, again, every year, of course, the percentage of donors making sustainer gifts had been growing, right? And then all of a sudden it was flat, right? We had no change between 19 and 20. It was 61% of donors making any sustainer gift at all, either only sustainer gifts or both, and that didn't change at all. So again, that was it was an interesting standout for fiscal year 20 for sure, that didn't continue to increase. The other thing that jumped off the page at me here, and this is something that in any other year I wouldn't be talking about this at all, these both donors. I would talk about them differently, because a both donor, it could be somebody who converted this year, or it could be someone who made a sustainer who made an additional gift, right? Two very different groups of donors. So usually, right, I don't pay too much attention when they're all kind of combined like this. I talk about them separately, converters, right, and sustainers who make additional gifts. But I'm going to mention it here simply because that increase, right? It's not a huge increase. You think, oh, it's only 1%, Deb, that could be noise. And it could be, but it had been 5% for a long time, right? 5%, 5%, 5%, 5%. And so any change, right, is something to, raise your eyebrow a little bit and start thinking about, like, that's interesting. We had an increase in the percentage of donors making both a single and a sustainer gift. And we're going to talk about those donors a little bit more. The other thing I wanted to mention that radio obviously has lots and lots of sustainers, which is fantastic. It's the reason why you were able to withstand, right, the turmoil, right, of this year, and hopefully continue to do so with anything that might be coming in the future as a result of the pandemic. So nice strong percentage, 61% at the median making sustainer gifts. The range was 37% to 85%. Now, again, we're talking about radio, so format will have a lot to do with that. If you are a classical music station, you may be in that 37, 40% range of donors who are sustainers at this point. And that might be, you know, perfectly where you should be, right? Where it makes sense that, you know, that you're falling. If you were at that 61%, if you're an NPR news station, you're at that 60%, you're doing great. Well done, well done. I just want everyone to notice, though, however, that there are stations as high as 85% of all of their donors making sustainer gifts. So even if you're at that 61%, there could still be room for growth there, right? So I don't want you to kind of hang it up at 61% and say, you know, job done. All right. Let's go ahead and talk about new donors now, right? That's where there were some serious changes and concern really in the radio market this year. So at the very top, we've got your folks who are brand new donors of all, both sustainer and single gift combined, right? We see that spike in fiscal year 17 again, right? That all that listening that happened post 2016 election, right? And then the new donor counts started to decline following that point, right? So the new donor counts declined in 18, they declined again in 19, and they declined again in fiscal year 20. So while yes, new donors were certainly, it was a struggle, right? Bringing new donors onto the file, particularly in that last quarter, right? Because of COVID, of course, you know, your whole listening structure, right? People's whole lives structure changed, right? Dramatically, and it's going to have a big impact on your audience. But, you know, those declines in new donors had been happening prior to the pandemic, right? So it's not, the pandemic wasn't the only reason, I guess I'm trying to say, for those declines in new donors, right? So it's just something to think about when you're thinking about, you know, what's going to happen next or moving forward, right? That your new donors had been declining. So this was already you know, a place of, you know, of concern, right, for the system. Now, the second thing, however, that did happen, and I do feel like this was definitely driven by the pandemic, and we're going to take a little closer look at why in a moment, is this. When we take a look at your single gift donors and your sustainers, right? Your single gift donors, again, we see that pop in 2017 at 3,400 new single gift donors added to the file, and then those declines, subsequent declines in 18, and then again in 19. We'll look at 2020. Right? There was a little bit of an increase at the median in new one-time gift donors, single gift donors, right? Whereas the declines in sustainers continued, right? So there's something happened. There's something going on there, right, guys, with these declines in sustainers, right? Even though we saw an increase in single gift giving. So what did that do to the file composition? Whoa, it did a lot, right? It really changed things. It changed how your new donor file really looked. Back in 2016, we're about 41% of all of our donors, all of our brand new donors making a sustainer gift, right, in their very first year, right? That got up to 43%, there was a 42. So really in that, you know, 41-ish range, right, for the last 4 years. And then all of a sudden in fiscal year 20, an 8 percentage point decline in the percentage of brand new donors who made a sustaining gift. Right, so yes, you had a decline in your new donor counts, right? But more worrying, for me as an analyst looking at this and knowing what this means for retention and then long-term value, right, is that change in the percentage of sustainers, right? That is really something that I'd be thinking about. Again, as you look at these medians and you think about how you're doing at your own station, you know, what percentage of new donors you're acquiring as sustainers. Again, if you're at those medians, that's fantastic, and that's great, and you know, you're doing a really great job. But again, just to set your goals, right, and set your objectives, and to be thinking about, you know, next level. The range for new donor acquisition of sustainers is from 15% all the way up to 60%, right? So a wide range there in how stations are doing in acquiring brand new donors as sustainers, right? So something to think about as you set your goals. All right, so this page takes some walking through a little bit. So so settle in a little bit with me. Uh, this is a 5-year trend view, so you see across the bottom, right? We're going to start at 2016 through 2020, and what we wanted to do is that same similar view. We wanted to see, well, what percentage of donors acquired for radio in these years were making single gifts, and what percentage, made a sustainer gift in their first year. But I also wanted to split it up into quarters because I wanted to see what effect the pandemic was having, right, on this particular measure. So the top is looking at, again, that split sustainers and single gift donors acquired through July through March, right? And then the bottom is the last quarter of the fiscal year, right? April through June, right? So again, notice that for the most part, it's pretty consistent, right? Particularly for the first 3 quarters of the year, right? 39, 40, 41%, right? Across those first 4 years of donors being acquired as sustainers in the first 3 quarters of the year, the first 9 months of the fiscal year. Okay. If you look below, there's a little bit of ups and downs, but generally it looks like a pop in 2017. Again, that would have been the election, right? It was after the election is when we started to see lots of activity happening, and it was great. You acquired lots of those new post-election donors as sustainers in 2017, so that was great. And then it settled back down again to, by 2019, the same percentage of donors being acquired as sustainers in the first 3 quarters of the year was, happened in the last quarter of the year, right? So very consistent, right? And then look at fiscal year 20, how different it looks, right? There was already a little bit of a decline in the first 3 quarters of the year. Now, if I looked at this just months wise, and if I took March out and put March onto the bottom section, it might look a little bit different, but already we were seeing a little bit of a decline in the first 9 months of the fiscal year. And then look at that last quarter. I mean, obviously then, right? So what are we seeing there? Why would that be? Well, I don't know. I haven't done a focus group, right, with your donor, so I don't know exactly why the folks who were acquired in that last quarter of fiscal year 20 were more inclined to make a single gift than a sustainer gift. There are lots of guesses, right, assumptions, right, that people are making, and any one of them could be correct. Everything from changing everything from saturated markets to emergency giving, more emergency giving, to stations, maybe changing their messaging where it sounded more like an urgency situation, right? So perhaps more donors coming through in that regard. I feel like it probably had more to do with emergency giving, and so I think these donors acquired in that last quarter really need to be thought of and cultivated, stewarded, right, spoken to, talked to, right, like emergency donors, right, in order to try and keep them on the file in greater numbers. They worry me. I will tell you, they worry me. This worries me a lot. So we'll talk more about what we can do about that in just a moment. But before I get there, let's go ahead and take a look at how we acquired these donors. This is another sort of place we can say, yeah, it looks like emergency giving. Why? Because we saw a big pop in digital, right? Digital is a place where if when we look at relief organizations, right, all of a sudden, during an emergency, right, they get their websites blow up, right? That's where we see lots of emergency giving happening online. So these big boosts in digital, right? Again, it looks like emergency giving. Now, I know a lot of folks changed their fund drive strategies, right? And you did a lot of the quiet drives, and that will also increase your digital for sure. So, absolutely, that's going to have that's going to play a role. Some of you may have done Giving Tuesday Now, which is tends to be a digital strategy, so that could absolutely have done this as well. But that great big increase in digital giving, lots of one-time gifts at the end of the fiscal year, that last quarter, right? I'd be thinking about these donors in that regard. Are they emergency donors? So then what can we do, right, with these folks? What is our best bet? What's our best thing we can do? We can convert them, right? Convert, convert, convert. That should be top of mind for radio stations right now who saw this phenomena, who saw lots of one-time gifts come in, converting them. So these are your 5-year trends. I don't have trends for donors who converted, who were acquired at the end of during the pandemic. I don't know if they're converting yet or not. I'll find out for you in June at the end of the fiscal. But for last fiscal, just to give you an idea of what was happening with conversion, it had been declining, right? So on this page, what we're looking at here in that very top, let's just focus on that top part, those new people. These are folks who are new in the current year. They came out as single gift donors, and we're saying in the same year, so in that same fiscal year, did they become a sustainer, right? So it's going to be small numbers because they may not have had time to convert yet, depending on when they were acquired. But notice that in 2017, we had high conversion rates, 2.2%, and it's been declining every year since then, right? So the best thing that we can do is to see that start going right back up in that other direction. And how do we do that? We know how. We're fundraisers. We know what to do. We ask. That's how we do it. We ask quickly, and we ask often. Some of the organizations that rely more on conversion to grow their sustainer programs, they're thinking about this like, it is their job. It's their job, right, to convert these donors. What they do is start asking their single gift donors, their new single gift donors, to convert in the first month, right? So it's, thank them, and then the very next thing that they're getting is an offer to convert to sustainer giving, right? So what we see consistently is the organizations that do that, the sooner they do it, the higher their conversion rate. So like I said, anything else in fundraising, right? The more you ask, the higher your rates are going to be. This is, again, converting in the first year. The other way that we do look at conversion is, did they convert in their second year, right? By year 2, were they making sustainer gifts? And for that, the median is about 10% for radio. So if you're below 10% of all of your brand new donors converting, right, that's a really great place to set your goals for. Get at least 10% converting in year 2. And again, there are certainly organizations that have higher than that. So I'd be super hyper focused on converting those new single gift donors this year.
And Deb, if I can jump in, there's
sure.
a group. Can you name another type of nonprofit that's excellent at converting these emergency donors? Have you seen this work pretty well in the past from some other?
Yeah, sure. So like I said, a lot of the national organizations, those particularly who might be doing canvassing or things like that, right, who are seeing one-time gift donors come in. Some national organizations don't have a whole lot of luck with getting folks to become sustainers online, believe it or not. So they do acquire lots of single gift donors, and then they'll be quickly asking their donors to convert, and it's going to be across the different sectors for sure. I mean, but you want to think about your animal welfare organizations, your relief organizations, your environmental organizations as well.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, sure. Alrighty. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at retention, right? Why do we focus on this so much, and why am I so worried? Okay, so here's your retention rate trends for your donors, the median retention rate trends. We've broken up the donors here by their loyalty in the prior year. So were they new in the prior year, or were they not new? They gave last year, but they were multi-year donors. So if we take a look at those first year donor retention rate trends, we see how they're doing great, right? I mean, there's absolutely nothing at all wrong with these retention rates. The blue line again at the bottom is going to be your single gift donor retention rate. So these were brand new donors who were single gift donors when they were acquired. And you see the retention rates are strong, right? 36% is a strong retention rate for a brand new single gift donor, right? Public media in general does really well with first year retention. But when you take a look at how your sustainers are doing up there at the top, that orange line, right, at 81% in fiscal year 20, 81% of the sustainers are still giving 13 months later, right? These are folks who gave for the whole year and now have gone that, that first month into the second year, right? So these are folks, they're yours, right? They're solid. They are now solid sustainer citizens. They're going to keep giving, right? And 81% of them, oh my gosh, like crazy. That is such a high retention rate. And look what it did to the overall new donor retention rate. So let's go travel back in time for a moment and think about before we had all these sustainers, right? When they're all single gift donors, we were retaining about a third of our brand new donors. All those donors we worked so hard to acquire, right? And spent a lot to acquire, right? Only about a third of them, right, were still giving, right? Now, because of sustainers and because we acquire so many sustainers, look at that green line. That's all new donors, right? 60%, right? 60% of all of your new donors are still giving a full year later, right? That's tremendous. So now you have to think about that, right? The reason for that is because, again, you have such a high percentage of your donors making sustainers. So what's going to happen to that green line, right, in fiscal year 21? What can we expect? How should we be setting our goals, right? It's going to go down, right? It's going to go down because you're going to have a higher percentage retaining at 36%, right? So it's going to, it's going to pull that line down. Okay. Take a look at those multi-year donor retention rates. Let's go back to some good news. Multi-year donor retention rates. Look at those, right? 90% retention of your multi-year sustainers, right? 70% retention of your single gift donors, 83% retention overall, because again, such a high proportion of your multi-year donors are sustainers, right? They're the ones who stick around, right? So they become an even bigger part of your multi-year file, right? So again, really important to keep those rates high. If we take a look at those single gift donors by acquisition source, that's going to drive your first year retention rates. It's one of the key factors for first year retention, right? It's how they were acquired. So again, as you're comparing your retention rates to those medians, and if yours are a little bit higher, a little bit lower, right? You want to think about how are you acquiring your radio donors, and you can start breaking it out a little bit. You can say, well, if all of your donors are acquired through pledge, you don't do any mail, right? All of your web digital donors, maybe you're a joint licensee and you put them all into television, right? So if the only thing you're looking at is pledge, maybe you should be around 33%. That might make more sense for you, right? If you have lots of mail, right, that should be lifting your retention rates a little bit. When we take a look at the trends over time, the good news is I see on this page is right here, the web digital increase between fiscal year 19 and fiscal year 20. It increased by 2 percentage points, a rebound, from a little dip in 2019. And again, that bodes very well for fiscal year 21, even if those donors you're not able to convert. Lots of them came in through digital. So hopefully those that increase in retention rates, hopefully we'll see it continue, and at least they'll be retaining it at higher than your typical single gift donor retention rates. Take a look at the same view for donors acquired as sustainers. This time, again, we're just looking at the key channels for acquisition. So for sustainers, it's going to be digital and pledge. Oh, I'm sorry, I should explain. Web digital other is folks who are acquired online outside of pledge. That's what that means, web digital other. Pledge is just during your full-on fund drives, donors coming in either on the phone or online. So again, these are pretty consistent for both, right? Whether they come in online or they come in during pledge, if they come in as a sustainer, they're going to have nice high retention rates. All right, now one of the best things that you can do to even increase your stellar retention rates of your sustainers even further, of course, is to acquire them directly as onto direct debit, right, rather than credit card donors. And that's what this is looking at. It's just looking at the fiscal year 20 retention rates, 13-month retention rates for sustainers acquired, making their payments by credit card or making their payments by direct debit. And look at that difference, right? 78%. And oh my God, this is when I want to fall off my chair, folks. This is when I just want to faint, pass out on the floor. 91% retention rate of brand new donors. That's crazy town. It's crazy town, right? Donors acquired on direct debit, right? Almost all of them still giving a full year later. So again, if you really want to improve your retention, sustainers on direct debit. That's your way to go. The median of all donors making payments on EFT last year was about 14%. That's up from 9%. So great job. As a system, we are building that part of our file. 4 stations, 4, not many, but 4 have over 40% of their donors, brand new donors, all donors making their payments on direct debit in fiscal year 20. So they're doing great. All right, so now let's take a look at upgrading, or take a look at some issues revolving around donor value. Okay, so we're going to start with upgrading. So let's start with our single gift donors. Again, now I'm not looking at all single gift donors. I'm looking at multi-year donors, right? So because new donors upgrade and downgrade for all kinds of weird reasons, especially in public broadcasting with pledge, right? And pledge specials doing different things. So let's just take a look at those multi-year donors. These are folks who had all the time in the world, right, to make their annual gift, right? And they received your additional gift asks. They received your asks to increase their gift levels. They received your invitations to join mid-level giving programs. These are the folks that had, got it all, right? So what percentage of your single gift donors increased their giving at all, either their average gift or gift frequency or both? Right? In fiscal year 20, we're at 37%, and you can see how that was an increase from the prior year, right? It's as high as it's ever been in the last 5 years. So again, we talked about it earlier. I was alluding to the core, right? This year was really the power of the core in public radio, because these folks, again, these are your multi-year single gift donors. And what we're seeing, and we're going to show you in a moment, some increases in additional gift making. A lot of this increase upgrading was because of more additional gifts being made, right? People, again, hearing your message, understanding that there are people, their neighbors, right, who are out of work and unable to support the institutions that are important to them, right? These folks, who were able to still give, they did. Right? If folks were able to give, they did, and we're seeing that here. Now, if we take a look over here on the right, recurring gift donor upgrading. When we talk about recurring gift, sustainer gift upgrading, we're not talking about gift frequency. We're only talking about average gift, right? Because when you talk about upgrading your sustainers, that's what you mean, right? Did they increase their monthly gift? And here you can see it's been declining, and it continued to decline. This is one area, we're going to see it in television as well, that we're just not seeing that same sort of emergency pandemic response, right? Sustainers did not upgrade at any greater rates than they did before. And in fact, they just followed that same pattern of ongoing declines for that. All right, so let's take a look, however, at this additional gift issue. Let's go back here. So remember in the beginning, we were taking a look at all donors, and I said it was interesting that there was suddenly an increase, right, in those sustainers who were also making one-time gifts, right? So it could have been conversion, or more likely, it was sustainers who made an additional gift, who also made an additional gift. Like downgrading, prior to fiscal year 20, this was a metric that had been declining everywhere, right? Just the more people you have doing anything, right, the more fringy those donors are going to be, right? So, fewer ad gifts, right, is just part of that package, right? When you have lots and lots of donors, that kind of comes down. So over time, the percentage of your sustainers also making additional gifts was declining until fiscal year 20. Suddenly it increased. It went up to about 5% of all donors doing that, sustainers doing that, and it was an increase of one full percentage point, which again doesn't sound like a lot, but it is, right? That's a big turnaround. For single gift donors, the percentage of folks making more than one gift rose, this was multi-year donors again, rose to 26%. Again, that was a 2 percentage point increase. So what we have here is a situation where you have a lot of folks on your file, more than, certainly more than 2019 and probably more than several years ago, making these additional gifts. So that's fantastic. That's great. That's really good news. But what it means for fiscal year 21, right, is now your challenge is to get them to do it again, right, is to really think about, how you're going to talk to these folks, right? How are you going to interact with them? How are you going to express to them how valuable those gifts were, and how much they were appreciated, and how they were used, and how much it's still needed, right? That kind of giving is still needed, so that they do it again. Because another place that I'm worried about is downgrading in revenue, right? Overall downgrading in revenue, because these donors don't make as many gifts in 21 as they made in 20. Right, so definitely I'd be looking at these donors very specifically with very targeted asks.
Deb, a question for you from
Yeah.
the audience. What techniques have been effective in upgrading existing sustainers?
Oh, none. Sorry. I'm sorry. Actually, there have been. One of the best ones that I've heard about is telemarketing, and using their, I want to say challenge, using a match, but using a challenge, but meaning they're the ones who are creating the match, right? And encouraging them to do a challenge fund, a matching fund, contribute towards that, right? That their additional upgrade would go towards encouraging other folks to upgrade. That's one of the most effective strategies that I've heard, and it's through telemarketing. Telemarketing tends to be the best place to do that. Yeah. Yep.
That's a great answer. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Okay. All right. So last thing then in radio, we're just going to take a quick look at what has happened to all those donors who were acquired back in 2017, right? What does their value look like in 2020? So here we're taking a look at them as to whether they started their giving as a sustainer or as a single gift donor. And if they started as a sustainer, excuse me, back in 2017, 66% are still giving in fiscal year 20, and their value is $359 per donor, right? So, as an incoming class in 2017, those donors, each of them now valued at $359 per donor. And we take a look at those single gift donors, right? 31% still giving in 2020, which again, any other nonprofit sector would, be jumping up and down for joy, right? So it's still high, but obviously cannot compete with sustainers. And again, their value $100 less, right, than the value of those sustainers. So again, as you're thinking about what happened in 2020, I'd really be taking a good hard look at that sustainer ratio, seeing how we can turn that tide around. If it's continuing into 2021, right, what can we do to reverse that, and how can we encourage those donors to become sustainers now, even after they've made that single gift? Okay. Any questions before I move on? How's my time? All right.
Nope, no questions. We're good. And we've got about 21 minutes left.
All right, very good, very good. Okay, let's dive into television now. So television was quite a different story, right? They're sending everyone home, right? And everyone's looking for interesting and entertaining, diversions through COVID. Passport certainly is the big story of fiscal year 20 with television. Donors increased at the median by 5%. Revenue increased by 6% for television. Over the 5-year period, we see that donors have been increasing actually at a faster rate than revenue for television. Donors are up by 12%, revenue up by 9% since 2016. Again, we see that kind of interesting phenomena where we see a bump in 2017, which may have been a little bit attributed to the incoming administration, some fears of funding, possibly, but also that was the year that Passport launched, right? So an entirely really different reason driving that growth in 2017 than radio, but both services seeing that bump in 2017. And then again, there was some low-hanging fruit there, right? If it really was a Passport sort of situation. So some declines following that bump in 2017, and then again, another serious bump in 2020 for television. Taking a look at donor value for television, it's a modest increase at the median. Generally, if we were to look at, so we're going to take a look at new donors and see how Passport is really impacting donor value for television. We'll see that it is coming down, particularly for those sustainers. But at the medians, it's holding pretty steady at about 132. A big difference from radio, though, right? It was 175, I believe, in fiscal year 20, right? So a big difference. And then if we take a look at the actual numbers of donors number of donors giving single gifts, right, versus sustainer gifts, this looks more typical, right? We don't see that that little weirdness that we started to see in radio. We see ongoing declines in single gift donors and ongoing increases in sustainer giving for television. Really, Passport has been again was the real story of 2020 for television, because those Passport donors just tend to give more heavily as sustainers. Again, there's a lot of thinking around that. Assumptions being made about why that might be, and is it because we tend to talk more about sustainer giving when we talk about Passport? Is it more of an exclusive sort of offer? It's always kind of hand in hand with that monthly giving ask. Possibly. Could be the age of the donors, for sure. They tend to be a little bit on the younger side, and younger donors tend to gravitate more towards sustainer giving for whatever reason. It could be that those donors are just behaving more like subscribers, right, than donors, right? And so they're used to paying for their Netflix and their cable bills and their internet, on that monthly billing cycle. So again, it could be one, both, any, all of those reasons. But at the end of the day, Passport brings in a lot of sustainers, and it's kind of keeping things nice and high and moving in the right direction for television. If we take a look at how this is playing out in terms of the distribution across the file for television, here again, we just see ongoing growth, right? It's at 45% of all donors making sustainer gifts in fiscal year 20, and that was an increase over the prior year. So ongoing increases in the share of donors making sustainers for television. Hasn't quite caught up to where we are in radio just yet, so that could indicate that there's still more opportunity there. It's just that there's more opportunity there. Again, lots of theories out there as to what's happening with sustainer giving. That'll take much more focus group type studies than I have. Again, if you're looking at where you are, where your station is, as far as what percentage of donors are making sustainers, and you're at that 45%, that's fantastic. Again, you're doing a great job. That's awesome. You should celebrate that. But if you're thinking about what goals should I be setting for myself, the range is from 30% all the way up to 60%, right? So still some opportunity there if you're at the median. All right, let's take a look at new donors for television. Again, this is just a real success story last year. If we take a look at the top where we have all donors in green, we see that increase between 16 and 17 that we talked about when we saw in the overall, and then modest declines following that. Again, some low-hanging fruit with those Passport donors coming on, and then things declining, a little bit in 18 and 19, and then boom, wow, look what happened in 2020, right? Great big increase there. Again, though it didn't shake up the percentage too much in the overall, look at how single gifts did increase, right? Even for television last year, and sustainer giving also increased, right? We didn't see an increase in single and then a decline in sustainers, right? That we saw with radio, but we did see that there were a lot of folks who came onto the file as single gift donors in fiscal year 20. So again, conversion. Right, it's going to be really important for our television group too. Yeah, is there a question?
So when we were talking about radio, it was conversion for people who were emergency response donors in a specific situation. Here, it sounds like we're really looking at Passport. And can I confirm, you don't really think these people were responding to the emergencies? So if the conversion messaging is about like the weekly passport emails telling them what's upcoming? I know we do that at Carl Bloom. Like, is this the push that they need?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, what you could have had here again is a lot of folks who came on with that one-time gift thinking that, COVID was going to be a 2 week, I was getting sent home from work for 2 weeks, right? I didn't know I'd still be sitting here a year later, right? So yeah, absolutely. And hopefully they've been tuning in, right, beyond that one program that they wanted to watch, and so yeah, renewing and converting to monthly for sure. I
Okay,
hope so. I hope so. And yes, I think you're right. I don't think the message to these folks is emergency and or thinking about them in that emergency sense. I think it's passport, right?
okay, great,
And
great.
continuing that. Yep, perfect. So here's how the percentages overall are breaking out for sustainers and single gift donors newly acquired for television. And again, we see that it's still moving in the right direction where we're still getting a higher percentage of these folks coming on as sustainers. So even though, yes, we saw increases in single gift giving, overall, the share of donors coming on as sustainers is still managed to increase. It's at 46%, about the same as the overall file. Again, I will direct you to the side there where I have some, just some breakouts and of the range for new donors being acquired as sustainers in I don't know why it says 2018. Pardon me, that's a typo. It should say 2020. Is from 29% to 68%, right? So some stations seeing, wildly high numbers of donors being acquired directly as sustainers for television. All right, and we did that same breakout where I wanted to show, I wanted to see if there was a difference in how folks were becoming donors for the first time as single gift or sustainers, if there was a change or a difference in that last quarter, particularly of fiscal year 20, like what it typically looks like over, or in a non-COVID year, and then what it looked like in 2020. And here you can see we didn't see the same thing in radio, right? In fact, there's a growing percentage of donors becoming sustainers in that last quarter of the year across the report period, right? It was about 34%, and it's up to 47%, right? In line with some growth that we're seeing in the first 9 months of the year, the first 3 quarters of the year. So again, we're not seeing that same situation at all, right, that we saw with radio. All right, and how are donors being acquired through television? That gray color that you see there, it looks like a clayish gray on my screen. That's we call it on-demand programming. It's Passport, right? That's Passport, and you can see it's Passport, right? That's what's driving all those new donors. It's what's it has been growing over time, and in fiscal year 20, a big leap up for Passport. And the thing to keep in mind with when we're looking at how donors are acquired here, it's that this is just looking at how it's attributed, right? So a Passport donor, an on-demand programming donor, it just means somebody clicked on that link on your own website or from the PBS website that went to your page. Plenty of people are calling in during pledge, right? Plenty of people are going online and just clicking on your donate now button, right, in order to get Passport. I call them Passport encouraged, right, donors, right? So thinking about those, just we look at it this way, but the other way to kind of think about your donors, I know that you're probably tracking, I hope you're tracking activation, folks who activate it and folks who are watching it, but also just thinking about your $60 donors, right? Donors that are coming in at that Passport level, right, who might be coming in through different channels, right, but aren't showing up there in that Passport source. But yeah, definitely, it's all about Passports, all about the Passport. We see declines in canvassing, of course. Canvassing put on pause for all, for just about everybody, and came back and went away, came back and went away throughout the year. So no surprise to see those declines in canvassing last year. All right, I also wanted to include again a little bit about new donor acquisition value. This is the average gift for single gift donors, and again, you can see how it's been declining since the since Passport came into the scene. Right, it was at $115 back in 2016, went down to 108 the year after, continued to decline through 2019, and then popped back up in fiscal year 20. So a little bit of an increase there in the average gift for those new single gift donors in fiscal year 20, which was great to see. But certainly less than it had been, and that's certainly a function of Passport. And then if we take a look at the average gift for sustainers, that's where there's really been a big change, right? That's where Passport's really having a big impact on donor value, is in the sustainer, on the sustainer file. See, back in 2016, the average gift for brand new sustainers was about $14, right? It's down to $9. Now it seems to have settled at $9. So it doesn't appear to be, going any lower than that, which is great to see. And I know in fiscal year 20, at least, if not earlier, many stations had sort of stopped talking about that $5 per month level, right? Certainly stopped talking about it in pledge. We're starting to talk to stations a little bit more about what they're doing online and asking, and it looks like, a little bit more than half have taken the $5 offer off of their websites as well. And they have other, they're still offering Passport at the Passport level. You can still get Passport at $5 per month or $60 for the year, but they're just not talking about it anymore, right? In an effort to start lifting that that average gift a little bit higher, back to where we're used to seeing. But it's bringing in tons and tons of donors, right? And
Sure.
sustainers. Yeah. So I always say it's okay to lower the value of your donor, right? If you're getting enough, right?
You want more people. Yes.
That's right. It's perfectly okay. It's perfectly okay. All right, let's talk about retention. Here are those 3-year trend views for donors by loyalty. Once again, when you take a look all the way on the left, that first year donor retention rate trends, that single gift donors, again, about a third, right? Coming back the following year, doing good, increasing, right? They look great, but cannot compete even in television, right? Which doesn't have quite as high rates as radio does. Still, it's about half, almost a little bit more than half the retention rate of the sustainers at 67%. And again, over half now of all of the brand new donors, right, still giving the following year, right, 54%. Again, so just remember, wasn't that long ago, right, when all of our donors were only retaining at about a third. So such a big difference those sustainers have made. Yeah, is there a question?
I do have a question, and I hope this doesn't take us over time. But so 2 questions actually. Did stations who shifted focus from the $5 to the $10 see a decline in their sustainer acquisition or conversion?
No. All reports are that it has not hurt them. There are some stations who did see some declines in sustainer, and they're thinking about that, right? That was one of the possible causes, right? And so they put that in the, let's take a look at that, let's review that, let's do some testing. But other stations that have done it have not seen those declines, right? So at least not in every market. I don't know.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Okay.
I'll let you keep going for time's sake, and may have one more question later.
Okay. All right. Okay, and so then we have the first year retention trends, again by origin source, the sources, the key sources for acquisition. This is single gift acquired television donors. Again, you see nice lifts for just about every key acquisition source in fiscal year 20. A lot of these are a rebound. Again, there's some of them had a little bit of a dip perhaps in 2019, and we're rebounding from that. But generally, we're seeing nice lifts. And again, that web, digital, and on-demand programming are the 2 that I'm most excited about because of how many more donors were acquired through those channels in fiscal year 20. So again, that bodes well for fiscal year 21. And if we take a look at the same type of view, but for sustainers, for 13th month retention rates, just nice, again, nice and strong and solid and growing over time. A lot of this has to do, again, with more donors being acquired onto EFT, also has to do with stations just doing a better job of recapturing those credit card numbers, credit card updaters in place on websites now, doing a bang up job. These all look fantastic. And again, most are increasing over time. Once again, we've got your breakouts for brand new donors acquired on credit card versus those acquired on direct debit. Again, not quite as high as radio, but again, oh my goodness gracious, look at that, 83% of brand new donors acquired on direct debit still giving a full year later. Right? Again, you just can't beat it. 4 stations with more than 30% of all of their donors giving by EFT in fiscal year 20. So definitely possible, right, to build that part of the program. All right, and we'll take a look at those upgrading and downgrading. We're going to see similar trends to what we saw with radio. For those single gift multi-year donors, an increase in the percentage of donors upgrading in fiscal year 20, up to 36%, as high as it's ever been. Right, so again, there could be some of that additional gifting happening in there that we're going to want to see repeats of, hopefully in fiscal year 21 and beyond. And again, when you look to the right, those percentages of donors who are upgrading their average gift for sustainers is not increasing, and in fact, it's declining over time, and it's less than it is for radio. And we're going to call that probably an impact of Passport, right? Those donors tend to settle in where they land, right? Now, the good news is that for television and radio, the percentage of donors downgrading is going down, right? Both of them have started about a 5%. They're both down to about 3%. So those folks who aren't upgrading aren't downgrading. They're just staying where they are, right? So again, a little bit of a silver lining there when it comes to upgrading and downgrading for sustainers. Once again, taking a look at the percentage of donors making additional gifts. For television, we're at about 3% of our sustainers also making an additional one-time gift. So again, less than what we're seeing in radio. And it didn't move as much this year as it moved for radio. Like I said, I feel like those radio donors who are core listeners, core donors really came through for radio this year, whereas there wasn't as much emergency giving for television donors. They did come through for you, but not as much in that emergency urgency sense. But there was a little bit of a lift. So again, there could be some more new additional gifters in there that you're going to want to identify and encourage that good behavior to continue. And again, a small lift, a 1 percentage point increase in single gift donors who made multiple gifts last year. So there again, perhaps some folks, again, digging a little bit deeper for you in fiscal year 20. And again, you want to really make sure to encourage that really good behavior. And then the value of those donors, again, over time. So again, I went back to that same year, 2017, in this case, the first year that Passport was launched for most stations. And just taking a look at the two groups, donors acquired as sustainers, 50% still giving, a long-term value of $257 per donor, so less, right? Their retention rate's a little bit less, and the value is a little bit less than radio. And again, a lot of that donor value is going to have to do with with Passport, right? Coming in at that lower level, but still doing better than single gift donors acquired the same year. So finally, the big takeaways, we talked about a lot of them, right? Refocus your efforts to build those sustainers, right? Really be thinking about how to turn that tide around if possible. Concentrate on converting your single gift donors to sustainers. Increasing digital and mobile acquisition efforts. I think there's still lots of potential there in the public radio field, as we heard in the last session. I hope you attended. Some really great things happening in that space. Some new things that we learned during the pandemic. Converting donors to EFT. Consider other online payment methods, folks. Please do consider PayPal. For folks giving, right through our phones, right? We want to make it as easy as possible to do that, right? And PayPal certainly fits that bill. And finally, engaging with those donors who made all those additional gifts for you last year. That's
Okay. Deb, you're brilliant, and that was wonderful, and I so enjoyed it. And I want to, for the people that may have another meeting, I want to quickly say, at 3 p.m. Eastern, so in a half an hour, there is the session with Jeff Regan where he's going to talk about passport strategies. So Deb has given us this great analysis that for the TV folks out there says, please talk about passport as much as possible. Jeff is going to tell you how to do that and the testing that they've been doing. So we hope you can join. Now, if anyone wants to stay, I'll just ask you 2 really quick questions, Deb, and I think they're probably easy for you. So do you think EFT sustainers stay longer mainly because it's a bigger effort to do EFT in the first place, or simply because credit cards expire for sustainers?
That's a great question. So is it psychology or process? Probably a little bit of both, right? I mean, the harder somebody works to give you, their hard-earned cash, right? The more devoted they are going to be to your organization. So that's a great insight. It could be a little bit of both. However, right, folks are encouraging folks to do this, right, at greater rates in some places than others, right? So making it easy on the donor in the first place, right, is probably the first place to start. Yeah.
Okay.
Great
Good.
question.
Good. And I think also the knowledge that EFT is possible and more helpful, is more they care about the organization. Okay,
Yeah.
so one final question. Do you think and you may have touched on this a little bit, do you think the high numbers of new sustaining members will lower sustainer retention rates next year?
Oh, it's possible. Like I said, whenever you get a whole bunch of new people doing anything, right? Again, they could be a little bit more fringy, right? Than other, than your longer on file donors. So it's absolutely possible. But again, there's so many different things that you can do to encourage higher and stronger retention, right? And just making sure your processes are in place, running like a well-oiled machine to keep those credit cards up to date. Convert them to EFT if they didn't start out that way. So there's ways to encourage strong retention. And I will say that retention is increasing every year, right? Even though we're growing that population, and I think that's because we're learning how to do it better and better and better. Yeah.
Well, good. Well, this has been just such a wonderful treat. Thank you so much, Deb. We really enjoyed our time. There were lots of great questions, good feedback. So with that, we'll let everyone go. We hope to see you in the next session in a few minutes where we talk about passport strategy. Again, Deb, thank you for illuminating us. It was wonderful. And to the audience, have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.